Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Bayou Bets. It is Thursday. It is the first day of February 2024. We know what that means. Super Bowl right around the corner. Before we get started here today, we will remind you that bet.NOLA.com is your source for all the line moves, all the value plays. We're going to have a few of them here today. And we ask you politely to subscribe to the Bayou Bets YouTube channel where you can always find out when we're going on. It is just almost the off season, so we're reverting to our off-season schedule. We have Thursday Bayou Bets in the afternoon. We will have Datitude on Friday morning. We'll have a couple extra shows here and there. I know Fantasy Roundup will be starting up again soon as we get closer to baseball season. I'm Jim Derry. I'm here with Spencer the Guru. And what is going on, Spence?
Hey, what's up, Jim? Yeah, I'm excited. We'll probably have a fantasy show this Tuesday to break down props some more. I know we'll have a few on this episode. But, yeah, man, excited for Super Bowl Sunday, not this Sunday, but the week after, and even got the NASCAR action this weekend. There's a lot going down. NBA, spring training in a few weeks, yeah.
And Pebble Beach is kicking up. Golf is about to kick in. We'll look at some golf stuff, not in today's show, but as we go forward, we'll start talking a little bit of golf as we go forward. Golf will be picking up real soon. Next week is the Waste Management, the weekend of the Super Bowl. Always a lot of fun. And to me, that's kind of the kickoff of golf season, although Pebble Beach is pretty fun. 45 of the top 50 golfers are competing this weekend in the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Just saw Tom Brady and Scotty Scheffler. Tom Brady actually hit one across Scotty Scheffler on accident, and he didn't know what green he was supposed to be hitting at. So he's obviously not the GOAT in golf, but that's okay. We'll forgive him. All right, before we get to Super Bowl talk, we do want to talk about the Saints and the offensive coordinator search. And Spencer, it's interesting because there's a lot of fans out there, and I see some things on social media that I don't agree with. Shocker there, but a lot of people are saying or panicking, I guess, of sorts, that it's taking the Saints a long time to get their OC. I think it's a good sign, actually. To me, this tells me the fact that they haven't jumped in and hired someone, tells me that it's probably not Ronald Curry, which is not what most fans want. Again, I've said this before. Ronald Curry may end up being a great offensive coordinator someday, somewhere. But I think that most fans of this organization want some change, need someone from the outside to come in and take over this offense. And I think that by this taking so long tells me that it's most likely someone that's still coaching. If you're talking about someone that's still coaching, the most likely candidate for that, or at least candidates, are either Clint Kubiak or Brian Griese. Both are still coaching for the 49ers right now.
For sure. Yeah, I'm hoping that's what it is, because I'm hoping it's not the opposite, to where it's like, well, no one wants to come to the Saints, and they're just going to have to take whatever's left over, which could end up being Ronald Curry. So hopefully they can get someone like a Kubiak, because I feel like the job's fairly appealing. They've got talent there, with Olave, Kamara. You've got pieces, Taysom Hill. There's talent over there. Rashid Shaheed. It's not like the Saints offense is just barren of talent. They've got pieces over there for the new OC to work with. So I'm thinking that there's still a decent chance they can land Kubiak, and the other teams want him too. But a lot of these, there's no salary cap with coaches. If the Saints are willing to fork up the cash, I think there's a good chance they can land him.
Well, BJ must not like what I said. Maybe he's just like a hater. I don't know. BJ saying I had an awful take. So I don't know what part he's saying is awful, but that's okay. If you don't agree with me, it's fine. And if you either agree, disagree, whatever, and you want to be part of the show here this afternoon, you're more than welcome to type in a comment, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're watching on Facebook, or if you're watching on X. Type in your take, and we'll put that here on the show, and we'll talk about your comment. If you have a question, that's fine as well too. We'll see how it goes. All right. Look, you see the offensive rankings down there at the bottom left of the screen, and they're not nearly as bad as people have been talking about it, even as bad maybe as me. But to me, it's kind of the eye test as part of a lot of these things. And even though they were 14th overall in defense, to me, they had the talent, Spencer, to be so much better than that. And I'm not just talking about Derek Carr, and you talked about Alvin Kamara, and I thought the running game was going to be so much better than 21st. The offensive line obviously didn't play very well. They need to address that, I think, in the draft. I think is the most likely place where you're going to address the offensive line. Maybe get someone in free agency that will help shore up and be a solid backup. But I think you need to draft a left tackle in the draft with the #1 pick. but they have got to be better offensively.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they will be, especially if they can hire Clint Kubiak, someone that is familiar with getting a good running game going, working with Kyle Shanahan. It's a run-first offense. Even though they've got all those good receiving weapons, at the end of the day, it's still a run-first offense. We'll get to that for the props part of this show as to why I've 49ers, certain 49ers running back. Think I know who I'm talking about. I really like for a certain prop. We'll get to that later. But yeah, I just feel like if you bring in Kubiak, that's going to really help the running game, specifically Kendre Miller. I think Kendre Miller would really benefit from a new system. He was hurt a lot last year and never really got going, but I think he's a pretty versatile back and in a fresh offense. Hopefully he'll have fresh legs and should do pretty well. Him and Kamara should be a good 1-2 punch because I don't see the Saints bringing back Jamal Williams. He didn't show much of anything last year, and at his age, to me, he's a cap casualty.
Lloyd asked, what's our ranking and scoring offense? And I know where you're going with it. You're thinking it's bad, right? You're thinking it's, well, if total offense is 14th, and you're thinking that the points per game is like 18th, 19th. I know that's what you're thinking, Lloyd. Tell me I'm wrong. Well, it's actually 9th. They actually had the 9th best scoring offense in the league, so it was better than their yards gained. So their offense scoring output, it says just a question. Okay. I know when I'm asked that question, and I would think that way too. Actually, when I went to look it up just now, I thought it was going to be lower than the total offensive ranking, but it's not. They rank 9th in total scoring, and they actually rank 6th in defense and points against. So if you looked at Spencer, that's a crazy thing. If you just looked at the Saints numbers and points per game and points allowed per game, 9th in points per game, 6th and points per game allowed, it just goes to show you how an underachieving team this was.
Right. Yeah, that's why they had to make a change because statistically speaking, Pete Carmichael should have been retained if you just look at the pure numbers, because he actually led a huge turnaround for the offense down the stretch. But I think it's deeper than the numbers, though. It's a locker room issue. These players clearly didn't respect that coaching staff. And even though they kept Dennis Allen, they had to shake things up. Kind of like the Eagles. Yeah, they kept Sirianni, but they had to shake up their staff because players were clearly losing faith in the direction of the team.
There's no question about that. And, you know, I'd run this slide a few weeks ago, and I thought it was worth putting back up there, the schedule that the Saints will face next week. Because honestly, as we go forward next week, we're probably going to be all Super Bowl, and it's going to be kind of hit or miss as we talk about the Saints going forward. But if you look at this schedule and what they have ahead of them, you know, the good news is you have 9 home games next year. This was your 8 home game, 9 road game, and your 17 game schedule. So they'll have 9 home games, barring they take one of them away like they did last year, or I should say in 2022, when they sent the Saints to London for what was supposed to be a home game against the Vikings. They could do it again. They could send the Saints overseas and take away a home game, which you would hope they wouldn't do that. I don't think they would do that twice in a row, but we'll see. You never know with the NFL. But that being said, even though you look at the opponent's win percentage and it's 453, it's kind of misleading because you have the Panthers on there and you have the Commanders on there, both of whom were absolutely terrible. And you look at some of the other teams on this list, honestly, obviously the Broncos and Sean Payton coming to the Dome next year will be interesting. The Rams, who the Saints just can't seem to beat, at least when they're healthy. They beat them at home a couple years ago, but they were a shell of what their team normally is. The Browns up and coming. Will they be good again next year? And then you look at the road schedule. Green Bay is going to be so much better. Playing Dallas on the road, playing at Kansas City, a Super Bowl participant, playing at the Chargers, who we know are going to be a lot better. That's another thing that skewed this schedule. So there's no question this schedule next year is much tougher than it was the one they just played.
Yeah, it definitely is. And unless they really knock it out of the park with this OC hire, I don't see this team having a winning record in 2024. Obviously, too early to make an official prediction, but just looking at this schedule, I'm just like, I don't see this thing. Like, all those road games are just, I mean, okay, if you win 2 of the NFC South games out of the 5 other games, I don't see the Saints. The only game that looks like a win there is the Giants. All those other ones, like the Cowboys looks like an L, Chiefs probably an L, Packers an L, the Chargers with Harbaugh's probably an L because they're going to be a lot better. I don't like the schedule at all. And the home schedule.
I'm not a fan of Harbaugh, so I'm not going to give him that one just yet. But We'll see.
I hear you. That's fair. And then you get Sean Payton coming back. He's
That
going
one's
to
gonna
be
be
fired
fun.
up. Yeah, that'll be a fun one. I think that'll be a very close back and forth game. And the Raiders, if the Raiders bring in Russell Wilson, they're going to be better. That's the latest rumor. They improved their defense, and if they can bring Russ in, they should improve their offense. And the Commanders, if they draft Jaden Daniels, I think they could be sneaky potentially. So, yeah, this schedule does not look easy.
Well, it's not easy, and it's really not supposed to be easy, to be honest. You just played a historically easy schedule. You're not going to have another one for a little bit. All right, let's move on because I do want to talk about the Super Bowl, and that's how we're going to spend most of the rest of our show. We are going to finish the show talking about the Pelicans a little bit and how they finally broke a 3-game losing streak. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I do want to get into the Super Bowl, and there we're going to talk about props in a little bit. Some things that we think that you should bet now and not wait on. But in this section right here, and you see some numbers, you see MVP numbers on the screen, you see odds to score a touchdown, and anytime touchdown, that's at the bottom right. But overall, Spencer, without getting into the line and too much of what we think, I think it's going to come out when we show what our props are, because actually you and I have similar kind of props. One of them's the same, as a matter of fact. But what do you look at as far as attacking, like what you might want to bet now and what you might want to wait for?
For sure. Oh, as far as like the props?
Yeah, well, anything really. I mean, what do you think's a good idea to bet
even
early?
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, I mean, if you really like the 49ers now, I'd probably bet them now because I feel like there's going to be more sharp money coming in on them, to where I think that line could go to as much as 3. So I'll probably settle at like 2.5. But to me, if you can I like this -2 price. I'm good with that because I think it'll be, to me, anything under 3 is a value with the Niners because to me, they're just the more talented team. And I feel like people are going to get clouded by recency bias because recently the Chiefs have been playing better in the playoffs. They've been the hot team, just knocked off the Ravens. 49ers kind of struggled 2 weeks in a row with the Packers and Detroit. So to me, you're getting some value there because I feel like with the Chiefs, yeah, they got Mahomes. He's the rightful MVP favorite. But I mean, to me, Purdy and McCaffrey are way better values because I think the Niners, I mean, they're the favorite to win the game, yet Mahomes is the MVP favorite. So I feel like there's value. If you're going to bet now, I'd take the Niners and maybe one of those 2 studs that they've got for MVP.
Yeah, it's interesting because I thought I was kind of surprised at the original line movement. The Niners came out as a 2.5-point favorite, and it immediately went to 1. The Sharps couldn't wait to pounce on Kansas City, Sharps and everyone else. I mean, I think it was a lot of Mabels out there too betting it too. But these Sharps are going to try to middle this number, I think. And I think there is a possibility that it gets to 3. But if you think about what happened last year and why I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen, I'm a little confused because last year I was very confused about what happened. Kansas City opened up as a favorite last year. There were no injuries. It got bet so hard on Philadelphia that it went all the way past Pick'em, and Philadelphia ended up as a 1.5-point favorite. So to me, it really could go either way. So I'm not sure. I like San Francisco right now. I'm not making that my official bet because I still have to go through the whole week full of analysis and going through and looking at trends and numbers. But right now I'm leaning towards the Niners. And if that were the case, I had a chance to bet it at -125 earlier today. And I was like, should I pull the trigger? Should I pull the trigger? I already have a bet from 6 weeks ago, NFC -2. I have NFC -2 at even money, and then I have NFC -120 on the money line. So basically, I have the Niners now at -120, but I want to put more money on it. And now I looked later on this afternoon; it was already -130 at DraftKings. I think it's -130 at Caesar. So did I miss the boat? Is it going to come back down? It's kind of one of those things where I just want to wait and see now. I'm not ready to put money on that thing either way. I don't know what's going to happen with the total either. It's kind of bounced around as well. So, and that goes, obviously, if you like Kansas City. This thing may go to 3. I don't think it's going to get that far. I think, if anything, it would stop at 2.5 and kind of work its way back down again. But will it settle at a number like 1.5, 1? I'm just not sure. This is just a weird time. And whenever you get these lines that are this close, it's kind of hard to tell with what they're going to do.
Yeah, it really is tough to say. I feel pretty confident in saying the public's going to be all over Kansas City, but a lot of times they react toward the sharps as opposed to the public, because the public money tends to be less per bet than the
Right.
sharp money. So the sharp money tends to move the line more. So that's why I'm still thinking the Niners are a decent play right now. I wouldn't put the mortgage on it or anything crazy. I just feel like you could put like a unit or two on it now and see where it goes. If it gets to like -3, I'd probably just be like, well, I've already put my unit on it. Where if it gets to like gets even better for them, like -1 or even -1, I'd be like, well, I'll throw another couple units on them at that point.
Right. And you have to be careful. To me, one of the things that I always preach about is to put aside, decide how much money that you want to spend betting on the Super Bowl, whether it be $20, whether it might be $100, whatever your unit. If your unit is normally, let's say your unit is $20, okay, and you normally spend, I don't know, $100 a week. Well, it's okay to spend $100 on the Super Bowl, maybe a little bit more, but you have to be careful. Don't go and say, well, I'm gonna bet 150 now. I'm going to bet a 200 later. And the next thing you know, you're 500, 600 deep in on the Super Bowl. I mean, I've done this before. That's why I'm telling you, you got to be careful, and you have to stick to whatever number you set out in the beginning. So again, if your number is, if you say, look, my max is $50 on any week, then it should be $50 for the Super Bowl as well, or no more than maybe $70. So if you're a small player, that's okay. Have fun with it, because remember, we're supposed to have fun. But don't go and just chasing everything. That's why bet a little bit now. Find some things you like, the values now. And the things that I think are values right now are props. We're going to get into our prop bets. And as more beyond just the props, the things that are profitable now are overs props. If nobody likes to bet an under. No Aunt, and you know, we use the term Aunt Mabel. It's something that came up in my column 10 years or so ago. I started joking about my Aunt Mabel and taking her Social Security check and betting with the public and losing. Well, Aunt Mabel likes to wait, first of all, and no Aunt Mabel likes to bet unders, excuse me. They're not going to bet, if they think Mahomes is going to throw for 290 yards and his prop is 260, well, of course they're going to bet the over. But even if they're not sure, they're not going to bet an under. So more than 90% of prop bets, people are taking overs. So that's why if you like an over, you need to bet it early, because that thing's going to go up. Whatever, almost every single prop bet, whatever the over-under is right now, it's going to be higher later on as you get closer to the game. So if you like an under, you wait. And we'll talk about some unders, especially next week. I know we're going to have some unders next week. But if you like an over, now's the time to bet it. If you like an under, you wait. And as far as the spread goes, look, I got to be honest. This year, I think your guess is as good as mine. I do agree with Spencer that I think that the public's going to be all over the Chiefs, which would make the line go down. But I'm not sure that the sharps don't balance that thing out. If it gets below a certain number, they may jump all over it as well, the other way. So if they like San Francisco, they might just be sitting there waiting for the public to bet more and more on the Chiefs, and then they pounce on it at 1 or 1.5, and it goes back to 2. So I kind of think we're where we're going to be at game time. This is not a game where I always talk about betting against the public, betting against wherever the most money is. I want to bet the other way. This one doesn't matter to me as much unless it's like really lopsided. When it comes to the Super Bowl, it's just one game. I'm not out. Look, you can't go search around for whatever game the public's betting on. There's one game. And so I'm not necessarily running out to bet against the public. If I'm on the same side of them, so be it. I just may not bet as much as I normally bet. So that's the way it goes there. Jeff says, curious about my take on John Harbaugh, saying it wasn't that type of game when asked why they didn't run the ball. We never really talked about, and this is the first show we've had since the AFC and NFC championship games. I'm glad you bring that up, Jeff. So let's talk about it a second before we get to our prop bets that we like now. And I'm curious to get your take on it. As far as the AFC goes, look, you can say it wasn't that type of game all you want, and I don't know why you would say that. So I guess I'm agreeing with you, Jeff. You're saying that Harbaugh's wrong, is my guess, and I agree. Because you can't – they only run Gus Edwards 3 times. They only run – I think Justice Hill only ran 3 times. And Lamar Jackson, we know, we all had the over 10.5 carries, and he only ran the ball 8 times. So to just get away from that running game, I thought was a huge mistake. Forget about Lamar Jackson for a minute. We all know the big mistake he made towards the end. But I thought that the coaching in that game was really piss poor for the Ravens.
Yeah, I don't understand what happened there. It may have been a thing about like the new OC Moinkin. The moment may have
Yeah,
just been a little too big for him, and his game plan was probably like, oh, they're not going to expect us to come out throwing, so we're just going to sling it. But it's like, what? That's just like, I feel like sometimes these coaches really just they butcher it because they overthink it.
100%.
They try to get too cute, thinking they're going to do things differently to throw them off. But to me, the common sense thing would have been to stick with the run. Chiefs have the elite pass defense. The Bills ran on them. They didn't have Willie Gay, the spy. So Lamar, I tweeted that during the game. I was like, why is Lamar not running more?
He
This is
should have.
insane. It was insane
100%.
to me. He just kept chucking it deep to freaking Zay Flowers, a rookie who played okay, but he had made a mistake there. I think he was one that fumbled like into the end zone. So like it was just one
Well,
of those things where why are you not playing to your strengths, which is running the
and then he
ball?
had the silly penalty as well, obviously, with the taunting penalty that just kind of killed him. He probably makes it into the end zone had he not had that taunting penalty before. I'm not blaming it on Zay Flowers and you get caught in the moment, but I just thought the Ravens just as a whole were undisciplined, which is completely
Yeah.
unlike a John Harbaugh coach team. I thought it was very strange. So taunt Gabe says taunting should not be a penalty in the NFL. We can agree to disagree on that. I don't necessarily think that taunting. I think taunting is okay in certain respects, but you cannot stand over a guy and pump and do your best Incredible Hulk imitation, Gabe, or anyone else that thinks you should be able to do that.
Joe Burrow tweeted that out, so now a lot of people are saying it should be allowed.
And God, if Joe Burrow says, I mean, that's ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, just play football. Why do you have to stand over your opponent and flex? Just play football. But that's a whole nother story. Let's get into the NFC real quick because to me, that was the more. There were definitely more opinions on the NFC. Obviously, Harbaugh might have made some mistakes, but Dan Campbell didn't belong anywhere near the NFC Championship game with some of those ridiculous, and I don't know, even we haven't talked about it, so I have no idea whether you're going to agree with me or not. But some of those ridiculous, Dan Campbell deserved to lose for some of those mistakes that he made in coaching that game, in my opinion.
I'm not gonna be as hard on him because that's his style. He lived
That
by the
doesn't mean it's
sword
right.
and died by the sword, so that's
Yeah.
just how he is. I think definitely heading into next year, he needs to dial it back. Some needs to look himself in the mirror and be like, look, might not shouldn't be this aggressive because it can bite you in the butt, as we saw it happen to him against Dallas and in this playoff game. But I feel like though he's gonna always still be more aggressive than the norm. It's just certain situations
I agree.
you need to dial it back a little bit. But I feel like that was his style all year. So I feel like why change in the playoffs? Like, 'cause I feel like that guy, we just criticized the Ravens for that. You're running well all year. Why change? And I know the Lions ended up losing, but I'm not as mad at Dan Campbell as I am with the Ravens because at least Dan Campbell is consistent.
Gabe says the difference between being aggressive and being stupid. Campbell was the latter. I couldn't agree more. Here's the thing. I get where you're coming from. Completely understand where you're coming from. That's the way you've coached all year. By the way, that way of coaching is going to get him out of the league. He's going to.
Oh, yeah, he's got to dial it back.
I tweeted out, and I was completely serious. I didn't take as much flack as I thought. There were actually people on my side, but I said he should be fired. I'm dead serious. I just think that's proof. You coach like that in a big game, it's going to get you nothing but heartbreak. And I think the Detroit Lions are going to have a tough time getting back to anywhere near where they are next year. It's a good thing for them. Ben Johnson's coming back. If you're a Lions fan, then you're thrilled that your OC is coming back, and you can try to keep going on. But to me, you get to that point and you make mistakes like, let's just talk about the first fourth down call, not the first one, but the first one in the second half, where he decides to go for it, where the 49ers come out of the locker room down by 17 points. They drive down the field. They stop as it is. They have to kick a field goal, which is enough to have them down and depressed. So now they're down 14. The Lions come back down the field. It's 4th and 2 from the 28-yard line, which means a 45-yard field goal. The guy has made 88% of the last 4 years, has made 88% of his field goals between 40 and 49 yards. So I don't want to hear you don't trust your kicker. That had nothing to do with it. It's like you said, that's how he is coached all year long. But instead of using common sense and thinking what that would have done to the 49ers, had he kicked that field goal and gone back up by 3 scores, it would have been lights out. It would have been 49ers lights out, because all that they gained coming out of that locker room was just negated in one kick, in one drive, and you got to start all over again. And now you're midway through the third quarter. You've burned an entire half of a quarter, and I think going back down by 3 scores would have been just too demoralizing, in my opinion. So, and Mr. Horror says he's going to end up with like the Chargers coach. And you know what? There are a lot of people out there calling him Dan Staley the other day, and I couldn't agree more. I predict right here that within 2 years from now, by February 1st, 2026, Dan Campbell will not be a head coach any longer in the NFL. And it should have watch what I'm saying. It should happen right now. They won't do it because people love him, but there are a lot of people, a lot of Lions fans are pretty darn ticked off at what he did, either basically blowing his shot to get to a Super Bowl. And here we are. A lot of people are upset, especially in New Orleans. Same old San Francisco and Kansas City. But you know what that is, Spencer? That's stability. 49ers, Chiefs, it's stability, especially when you're talking about a Patrick Mahomes. You're talking about an Andy Reid. It's Steve Spagnuolo. It's stability. It is what it is. That's what we've got.
Yeah, because it just goes to show how hard it is to win in those moments, because we saw Lamar Jackson let the moment get the best of him. Dan Campbell let the moment get the best of him. I'll defend him a little bit again, though, as far as I think the difference between Dan Campbell and Brandon Staley is that Dan Campbell's a leader of men. Brandon Staley, that dude, he was not an NFL head coach. Dan Campbell, I think he'll be able to look himself in the mirror and be like, well, I need to dial this back a little bit. I think he's got enough self-awareness to where I think he'll last at least another 5 years in Detroit. I mean, bringing him this far was huge, and I think they'll make the playoffs again next year. They've kept their core in place. I think they really believe in him. The fact that Ben Johnson stayed, that was really telling to me. I feel like if he blew it and still hadn't lost the locker room, that tells me that he's going to be there a while.
I just wanted someone to tell me the last quote-unquote leader of men who won the Super Bowl. That doesn't work in the NFL. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I get your point. I mean, Andy Reid, even though he's not as like outward
different
as Dan Campbell, I mean, Andy Reid, they respect Andy Reid, even though he's 100%.
I'm not saying I get you.
And Kyle Shanahan, those are leaders of men. They're not as eccentric as Dan Campbell, but they're leaders.
Yeah, but I think I get what you're saying. But what my point is, to be quote unquote leaders of men, that's a blanket statement that you can say for probably 21, 22 head coaches. We're not going to get into whether there's a leader of men here in New Orleans. But you could say that about a lot of coaches. To me, that doesn't do anything, not anything, but that is not a number one priority when you're talking about coaching. Of course, 100%, you want respect in the locker room. You've got to have it to have any chance to win a championship in the NFL. But to me, Dan Campbell, when you're making these, you're making testosterone-based decisions, all that's going to get you is fired in the long run, in my opinion. But I get where you're coming from. And I also get another thing is I completely get that. Look, a lot of people like watching that, and that's fine. I know a lot of people. Look, my son is one of these guys. He likes coaches that coach like they're playing Madden. That just doesn't work to me in the grand scheme of things when you're talking about in the long run of winning championships. You can't play the NFL like you're playing your Madden game. It doesn't work that way. Sometimes you got to take your foot off the gas. There are times. Anyway, we'll see. We're going to get to our props. And again, we told you before about prop bets that we think you should bet now. And we each came up with 3. Gabe Henderson's in the green room. Didn't want to come on today. But we're going to show his as well. We'll quickly show where we are big bucks wise. So we're going in the last week. It's tight. Gabe's holding on, clinging to a $14 lead. Guru absolutely still in this thing. Guru's had a rough week last week for the overall. He's been kind of on a run the last 4 or 5 weeks. Been chopping wood, I guess. So you've been chopping wood, Spence?
Yeah, I ran out of wood this week, unfortunately. I had more turkeys than wood there.
So it's a long way from over. We're going to see how it ends, and we're going to have our final big bucks picks next week. So this is not This does not go to big bucks, and Thomas is off today and Friday. We'll talk to him about his picks next week. But these are our best props we think to bet now. And we're going to start with Gabe. Gabe's not with us, but interesting picks to me. You can kind of look through props and see, and I have not talked to Gabe about his picks at all. But just by reading through these props, I think he's leaning Kansas City. And I can understand why he would like Kelsey here. Kelsey has scored both games this year in the playoffs. Is he going to score again? I'd say he's minus 120, so that's better than 50-50. At least Vegas thinks it's about a 55% chance that he's going to score. If you factor in the juice, his expected probability to score is about 55%. If you like Kelsey to score, you bet it now, because I agree with Gabe. That's not going to be minus 120 at game time. That's going to be more like minus 140. I would be willing to bet whether he scores again. Purdy, pass attempts, under 31.5. Maybe the thinking there is that as we go along and get closer to game time, there's going to be more on McCaffrey and more on the running game. Maybe that number will go down. That number might not change a whole lot. We'll see. And then use check. You got to lay a lot of wood. Minus 160 to catch a pass. But I actually like that. I think there's a good chance that he catches some passes. We'll see. We're in our official bets next week. But Guru, talk about your 3 prop bets that you like this week and why you think you should bet them now.
For sure. Yeah, I teased this one earlier. Christian McCaffrey to win MVP. I think, you should probably bet this one now, because I think there's going to be some action coming in on that, because it's the quarterbacks, of course, are at the top. But I think McCaffrey, there's a good chance if the Niners win that thing that he's going to really put the team on his back and be able to win the MVP there, because Purdy, I know Purdy's been doing his thing, but let's be real. That's a run-first offense that runs through Christian McCaffrey. If Christian McCaffrey wasn't on this team, they wouldn't be in the Super Bowl. I mean, I know Brock Purdy. I'm not trying to say he's not good, because he definitely stepped up, especially with his legs in the NFC Championship. So Purdy definitely deserves his due. But as far as the value to this team, I think McCaffrey is slightly more valuable, since he's a true workhorse. And it's normally a 2-3 back system where he does it all as far as shouldering that load and being able to lead this offense. So to me, at plus 475, you're getting the value here. I think it'll probably be more like plus 450, maybe even plus 400 by kickoff. So I'd recommend getting it now.
I agree with you. And then you talk about Mahomes. I agree with, look, if we think it's what I said early on, if you like Mahomes in the passing, 260.5, that may end up being Spencer. That could be, it wouldn't surprise me at all if that was like 280.5 by kickoff.
Yeah, definitely. And I see Mahomes having to duke it out with the Niners, because I don't see the Chiefs defense being able to slow them down. I think this ends up, I mean, I also probably would lean the over as of now, because I see this being, I know the defenses are good, but the Niners defense hadn't been as good lately. And then the Chiefs defense has been trending up, but they haven't had to face an offense like the Niners. I mean, the Ravens offense isn't on that level. Neither is the Bills. So I think Mahomes is going to have to air it out, and he's been doing better with MVS has finally been catching the deep balls, and then Rashee Rice, the rookies, kept doing good. Kelsey's back to form, so he's got his weapons rolling as well. So I think the over for him is a good play, as well as George Kittle. 46.5 to me is way too low, but as y'all know with totals, those are all they're all gonna go up, because Mabel and the Drunk Joe love overs. So to me, Kittle right now at 46.5, a really good value. I definitely see him getting over 50 yards here, because I think the Chiefs, with those really good cornerbacks, they're gonna try to lock down Ayuk and Debo, to where I think Kittle is gonna get a lot of opportunities.
I agree with the Kittle thing, and I look. That's one of my. I think Kittle has not been as involved in the playoffs as I expected him to be, and usually when he goes a couple games without being involved, it's sort of like Taysom with the Saints in a way. If they go a couple games and say, "Hey, we've kind of shied away from Kittle," I think that's what's going to happen here. I think you're going to see Kittle as a big part of this game. I think Kittle gets to 60, maybe 70 yards receiving. I think he has 5 or 6 catches. I think he's a big part of this game. But that being said, along the same lines with what you're talking about, McCaffrey, I like that bet, by the way. I may put something on both that and my MVP pick. The reason why I like Debo here is because of the value. We always talk about value on the show. Do I think that Debo is going to be the MVP? Probably not. But I think if you're going to give me 20-1, which is what it is right now, there's no way that number's staying 20-1. That is going to be 12-1 or 13-1 by game time. I promise you. And I think you're getting a ton of value on Debo MVP because, as you saw a couple years ago when the Rams won the Super Bowl, they probably should have gave the MVP. We talked about it in the show. It should have been Aaron Donald's MVP. But regardless, they gave it to Cooper Kupp. So the MVP of the Super Bowl isn't like the MVP of the regular season. It isn't always a quarterback. So when you're looking for a value, look, if it's the Chiefs, it's probably going to be Mahomes because he's Mahomes. It is what it is. So, but on the other side, if you think San Francisco has a decent chance to win, maybe that is one way to attack it. Maybe you bet a little bit on McCaffrey to win MVP and Debo to win MVP because unless Purdy just has an outstanding game, which is a strong possibility, I just think that if you play this game 20 times, Debo's going to win MVP at least twice, in my opinion. So, and I'm on the same boat, like I said, with Kittle. And then we talked about Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's become more and more a part of the Chiefs' offense, especially in the playoffs. And Spencer, he has been able to make catches in the playoffs that he wasn't necessarily making in the regular season. And we can see that Patrick Mahomes really trusts him right now.
Yeah, it's finally clicking with them. The thing with him, it always scares me. What if he goes back to having the dropsies? But 18.5, such a low number. All it takes is one catch and he's over. So I could see that being a value.
Yeah, and I like it, right? Like I said, if it gets to over 20, I probably wouldn't play it, and that probably will get over 20. So if you like that, now's the time to play it. Again, next week will be our official Big Bucks picks, our last Big Bucks of the year. Tom Casale will be back on, and Gabe's going to be on with us as well next Thursday as we wrap up Big Bucks and another football season here on Bayou Bets. So that's where we are with that. Before we go off today, I do want to bring up the Pelicans and them, to me, last night breaking that 3-game skid in Houston. I thought they played their best game maybe in a couple of weeks. They did it without Zion. They did it without Herb, and I think it was important for them to get that win. 27-21 now, 7th in the West. And their schedule, to me, even though they're on the road, they're about to go on their Mardi Gras trip. Well, they're actually on their Mardi Gras trip already. They come home for one game on Monday, and then they go right back on the road. Clippers and Lakers, obviously that's no easy feat, but I think they have a chance now to start making a little bit move, maybe claw their way. If they can get to like 4th or 5th, who the heck knows, Spencer? This team could be one of those teams no one expects anything out of, and then proves it later on they can be good.
For sure. Yeah, they've got potential. I'm just very cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, you're being skeptical. That's okay.
Well, yeah. Well, it's because of the Zion thing. I mean, how can you be so positive with him being out already? To me, if you're a Pelicans fan, you just got to hope that they can win without him and that maybe he'll come back within this stretch, because there's also the possibility it ends up a repeat of last year. I mean, look at last year. Oh, he's just going to miss a few games. He'll be back. Ends up out for the season. Can't trust that guy. And so you've got.
You look at the playoffs. That's just the yes for the playoffs at -400. Maybe there's value on the no, because it looks like they're going to win the Southwest Division title. That's probably why they think they're going to make the playoffs, but not that really matters in the grand scheme of things. But they're +300 to not make the playoffs. Spencer, what do you think? Maybe there's value on that they won't make the playoffs.
Because that you got to actually get out of the play-in.
That's correct. Correct.
Okay, yeah, I think there could be value there because, I mean, as we saw last year, without Zion, they struggled in the play-in. So, I don't trust this team right now. They're going to have to show me more. This stretch will be telling.
Very telling.
See if Zion can come back, and I'll have a better opinion after that. But as of now, I'm thinking that they're the best. They'll make the playoffs and be a one and done. I feel like even with Zion, I just don't trust them. I saw them against the Thunder last Friday. It was ugly. The ball movement was disgustingly bad. CJ McCollum is not a true point guard. Jonas was being asked to do way too much. BI's too streaky, man. I don't like what I'm seeing from him.
Yeah, and look, they go through stretches like this. There's a lot of people questioning Willie Green now, and I hate that because I really like Willie, but I will say this. They have not gotten better like I hoped that they would have throughout this season. Look, that's a much better record than what they've had in the past at this point, but to me, it's more than just your record. They are not playing with cohesiveness. They can't put together longer than a streak of a week and a half or 2 weeks of good basketball. And to me, that's just not good enough, especially when you're talking about going into the playoffs. You know, what does 1 week of good basketball get you? That gets you a couple of games, because the playoffs it's a different world when you get to the playoffs. So I do think they will make the playoffs, but I also agree with you. I think this next stretch, and you know, I like to put the next 6 games on here, but I think this next 6 games may be the most important of all the entire season. If you don't go 4-2 over this stretch, I think you're in trouble. So we're going to see a lot about what this team is made of, especially here in the early part of February. Schedule's easier in February for sure than it was in January. It was brutal in January. And they played well.
Definitely.
They played well early in the month when they were against really good teams, but then you know, you play a team like the Thunder and you get blown off the court. Just to me, it kind of shows where you're at. So they've got to get things better. They've got to shake things up, and it's got to be now. We've got to see something from this team. So we want to see them higher than 7th the next time we talk about the Pelicans, which probably won't be next week. It'll probably be 2 weeks from now before we talk about the Pels again. All right, let's wrap up the show with our final thoughts. Spencer, what you got?
All right. Yeah. You know, Pels, they got to do better there. But yeah, you know, also we've got, and I know a lot of y'all kind of, you know, prefer football and basketball, obviously, but we got NASCAR racing coming up this Sunday for the first time, just an exhibition race, but it's always fun, you know, just to see the cars back on the track. And then after the Super Bowl, be the Daytona 500. So I feel like it's a sport that is getting back to its glory days. I'm not gonna lie, like right before 2020, I was kind of out on NASCAR, but then after the pandemic, they did a lot of good things to get the sport back going again. And I've been back on the train ever since, and it's just been getting better each year. So I think this year will be even more improved. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Well, for me, a couple of personal notes. Well, one not so personal note, that Datitude will be back tomorrow morning. I'll be back with Larry Holder. As we'll talk a lot about the same things we talked about here, not so much from the betting angle. We're going to get our early thoughts on the Super Bowl and the matchup. We probably talk a little bit more about what happened last weekend than Spencer and I did here this afternoon. We'll also talk about the Saints offensive coordinator search live here on all these same channels at 10 a.m. tomorrow here. And then wherever you find your podcast, search for Datitude. I will add my monologue in, and that will be on around noon tomorrow. But for me, a personal note to go, by the way, will we cover the Kentucky Derby? Of course we will. Of course we'll talk about the Kentucky Derby. We still got a few months to go before we get to the Run for the Roses. So, but we'll definitely be talking about that. Today, February 1st, it is the anniversary. My wife and I got married 16 years ago on a Mardi Gras float in the crew of Morpheus. And surprisingly, shockingly, it was plus 700 that we'd make it 16 years. And she made the underdog win. She's still with me, Spencer. It's amazing. Here we go, 16 years later, and we're still married. So she didn't give up on me yet. She's probably the only person on the planet that could put up with me for that long, except my own mother. God rest her soul. And then secondly, a sad note in a way, my dad contracted COVID late last week, and he's been in the hospital for the past few days. So I asked for my Bayou Bets friends to give some prayers. He is going through a struggle right now, and we're hoping that everything is okay for Jim Derry Sr. So prayers out to my dad in Crystal River, Florida, and we hope everything works out for him. All right, Spence, we're going to be back next Thursday. It is going to be a fun show. Our final big bucks of the year. Tom will be on, Gabe will be on, and looking forward to it. And we will see you next week, my friend.
Yep. Happy anniversary. Prayers up to your dad, Jim. Thank
you, my man. And for all of you, again, we remind you to subscribe to the Bayou Bets YouTube channel. We'll see you next Thursday, tomorrow morning on Datitude. Everyone have a great weekend. Enjoy the parades if you live around here in New Orleans. Happy early Mardi Gras. Happy Carnival. We'll see you next week.